Hi, and welcome to Season 2 of the Team Deakins Podcast, a collection of informal conversations between Roger and James Deakins and a guest. We never know where the conversation will take us, so listen in and see where it goes. Today we're speaking to a property master. His credits include The Assassination of Jesse James, Falling Skies, Peter Pan and Wendy, and The Order. We're pleased to welcome Dean Goodine. Dean, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, welcome. Nice to see you.
Oh my goodness, I'm so thrilled.
We'd like to start with our normal question, which is, how did you get to where you are today? As a kid, were you rearranging the things on the table all the time? Or was this something that you found later? What's your story?
Well, when I was 4 years old, I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan with my mom, and I had just gotten a new puppy. And I thought the Beatles were called the Beagles, and my puppy was a Beagle, so I named him Ringo Starr. So I kind of thought at that moment that maybe I would have future in entertainment. Actually, the truth is, I lived in a small lumber town in northern New Brunswick, Canada, which is on the border of Maine for your American listeners. And anything to do with entertainment or Hollywood was in that little square box that transmitted light into our home, or on the transistor radio with the superstations out of New York in my ear for music. So I developed a strong love of music, even though I don't play music. My mom was a singer, and my sister was a charting singer. And so I've been around music all my life, but I was more the guy that would organize the microphones or find things to put together. Or if there was a talent show in high school, I always found the equipment or put things together, or I was the disc jockey for the school dance. It was like, I never wanted to be in front. I just always wanted to be in support of it all. And then after high school, I still, working in entertainment was like a Mars mission to somebody from northern New Brunswick. It's like the farthest thing you could ever think. And I moved west to Alberta to work in the oil fields. But I always had this little dream that I would get into radio or music in some way. And I'd be in some northern Alberta rig camp up on the border of the Arctic Circle and be 45 below zero. And I'd be in my bunk with my Rolling Stone magazine or my book or my headphones on, escaping where I was. And in the back of Rolling Stone, there was always had this ad for Full Sail Recording Academy in Orlando. And being 45 below zero in northern Alberta, the palm tree on their ad looked very appealing. And I never did make it to Orlando, but when I was, I had a life-changing moment. And, Roger, when I read your book, and I know Jan's story and other people, everybody seems to have a moment. And for me, I was doing really well in the oil fields. Like I was working fast, I was elevating. And I somehow, through a family relative, found myself sitting in a Calgary tower with this executive. I'd made it to the final two candidates to be sent to Oklahoma for 2 years to be trained as an offshore directional driller. And I was 24, and I was sitting at this table, and halfway through the interview, this light went off in my head, like, this is my life. If I say yes to this, this is my life. And because I've always had this other side of me of loving the arts, I thought, I don't want to be 50, which seems like a long time ago now and in my age, but I said, I don't want to be 50 with regrets. Despite everything, I've always been about experiences. So I looked at the guy and I said, I'm sorry to have wasted your time, but you know what? I think I'm going to go a different direction. And he just looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I immediately applied to the Alberta SAFE. Southern Alberta Institute of Technology had a cinema, television, stage, and radio program. And I applied. They got something like 1,000 applications. They only chose 80 students. So I had to go for an interview. And I just remember when I got the envelope in my little mailbox in my town in northern Alberta at the time. And it took me a few minutes to open it because I knew that somehow my life was going to change one way or the other. I was either going to go to school or I was going to continue working in the oil fields. And I opened the letter and it said, you've been accepted. And I think I almost fell on the floor.
Wow.
And when I got there, and I'd like to say that that program, even though I never graduated, because what happened was I did follow my dream of music and radio. But my one of my options, I had two options: film and sound recording. And those are the two classes I loved the most. Radio, when they told me I couldn't play the entire album side of Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon in one sitting, I was like, what are you talking about? I had a dream of being the 4 a.m. late night, DJ just playing album sides. And radio was all about tradio, like in small town Alberta, like I have 4 chickens, if you'll bring me my chicken coop, we'll make a swap. And so I was not enamored with radio that much, but I was sticking it out because I like film. And we had a wonderful film instructor named Billy Nobles. And my very first project was to go out and shoot like a little 8mm, 2-minute short. I don't even know what it was. All I know is I shot the entire thing out of focus. So when they spooled it in the class, Billy said, well, your framing was pretty good, but you've got a soft focus problem going on. It has something to do with the diopter. I don't really know. And a few months later, I redeemed myself with I had done a short film of a gymnast on a balance beam, and it was an editing exercise. And our instructor said, you can't make a cut on a move, but I'm a sports guy. I played hockey all my life. So I have a different sort of brain for that. So this gymnast was, as she was dismounting, I think I did her dismount from about 8 camera positions and cut it all together on, the little reels, and I'm trying to glue it together. And the assignment was due at 9 a.m. and at 8:45, I still had glue on my fingers trying to get it together. And he said, we're keeping this as a training thing for future students, because he said, you broke every rule, but you did it right. So then what happened, and I know this is a conversation and you can tell already, I just keep going. So feel free to stop me. You can stop me anytime. But like all things in film is an accident for a lot of people. And so what happened was I got a job between first and second year as a DJ in a club by the campus. And a bunch of my classmates from film stopped in for a beer. And they said, hey, do you want to come and be a set dresser tomorrow? And I said, what's that? And they tried to paint a really nice picture, like, oh, you're going to help establish the character, you're going to help us move some furniture and this stuff. In reality, it's like, you're going to be fifth guy hauling police file cabinets upstairs because the place doesn't have an elevator. And so I went and spent the day with them. And of course, one day gets you the next day. But I'll finish with this note and we can lead into more conversation, is that my first paying job, my first place I had to report to, which luckily was a block and a half from my apartment, was this house in my neighborhood. And I go knock on the door, and a pretty lady answered the door. And I said, I'm here to be a day call. I'm here from SAIT. I'm one of the SAIT students to be a day call. And she said, everybody's in the gallery on the side of the house. There's a little art gallery on the side of the house. That woman was Janice, my wife. The first person I met, my very first paying moments in film, was my wife, Jan, 40 years ago, and we're still together.
Wow.
So that's it. That's kind of a loopy way to get to that first question.
Wow. No, it was great.
How would you describe the job of a property master?
Yeah. What do you do?
Well, I think anything an actor handles in a scene, that's a simple answer. But I like to take it to, we help the actor become the character they're portraying through the items we place in their hands or on their person. And it goes all the way back to prep. If somebody's a gunfighter, we'll take them to the range and we'll work with them. If somebody's a surgeon, I will pair them up with the right people to show them how to do the job. So when I take a script and break it down, I read it for story first. The first thing, I just read it for story. I want to understand the story. And I like to mentally put myself in the room that is portrayed in the script. I like to think, what is in this room that would help the scene? Because if I showed up with just the scripted prop, my career would have ended 38 years ago. So I always try to think of what else can I bring, so that when I sit down with the director and also you, Roger, or any of the sort of people that want to sit in on the prop meeting, the initial ones, I have some ideas of things. I get the director's input first. But really, the simplest term is if picks up off the set if it moves. If an actor handles it, I'm in charge of it. It goes to, as Keith Walters said on your show a while ago, like eyeglasses, watches, rings, guns, knives, food. It really, and the gray area is the gray area. So you always have to discuss it. So if it's a smoking scene, set deck will get the ashtray. I'll get the pipe and the match that lights it. So it's really goes into that. But we always talk to each other to make sure. I operate, and I just had a meeting with my set decorator this morning on the show I'm doing. I said, I just operate, we're all one big department. And our job is just to make sure that the director and everybody has what they need. You never hear the line on my set, well, that's not a prop. Because if they ask me for it, it is now.
So something like glasses or a briefcase or a watch, if the actor, is that you or is it wardrobe? Because if an actor has a watch on his arm and not doing anything with it, he's not really handling it. But I noticed that oftentimes the prop people deal with that.
In my career, it's always been me. Eyeglasses, watches, briefcases. I certainly sit down with the costume designer to really outline what could possibly be a gray area. Like if there's a scripted necklace that is a real, like we will build, if it's a very distinct prop necklace that has multiple actions in a show or whatever, we will do that. But it's always working hand in hand with the costume designer. But I always tell them, look, you don't want me doing purses. Honestly, I'm not the guy to go to get you a beautiful handbag. I'm just not that guy. They look at me in my plaid shirt and my jeans, and I'm just not that guy. So I'll do all the other bags.
But at the same time, with, for instance, glasses, if they've created a certain look, you could get totally the wrong glasses because in their head, they know what this character will wear.
What happens there, James, is I did a film called Heretic with Hugh Grant a few years ago. Beck Woods were directing. His glasses were so important to him that I sat with the costume designer. We got on Zoom. She was in Los Angeles. I was in Vancouver. And I arranged for her to go to a place in Los Angeles to help. I had frames picked out. I sent her the photos and we worked together on it. And then she took 36 pairs of glasses to London on my behalf so Hugh could try on glasses. And we narrowed it down to 3 pairs when he arrived for filming. But he didn't want to make the choice till the day, which meant I had to ready doubles on 3 different pairs before we chose the glasses. And I go through that all the time with actors. I will sit with them and we will go back and forth on frame choices and everything. But I've always done the eyeglasses and sunglasses.
So let's say, you've got a set and there's a coffee table and there's magazines on it. Normally that would be set deck, right? Because it's magazines. But in that scene, the actor's pacing and he picks up the magazine, but then doesn't read it and throws it down. Does that then become props because he touched it?
There are two ways of that. There's the planned pickup, and then there's the non-planned. And the reality is that with magazines, whatever we place on that table, my feeling is everything should be clear to use in any scenario. A lot of times we do have a rule where you can't open the magazine and do an insert on it and stuff, but generally if it's on the set, they should be able to pick it up and walk with it.
But the set decorator is the one that's chosen the magazines, right?
Yes, with production design, unless it's a scripted beat that I am involved in. Create.
Yeah. So when 3D printers came into being, did that change your world a bit? Because now you could actually create a prop instead of trying to find what you have in your mind.
Yeah, the use of 3D printers for me are more if I have to build something that is, I will build a 3D print of it for size, approval, shape, all that design. But I rarely use a 3D printed prop on a set because the materials are a lot better now, but they used to be pretty fragile. So I generally will use it as part of a design where if I have to build a specific sword, I can try different sizes with the actor to see what size feels good on a 3D print before we go into fabrication, and to see the ability to sit in a meeting. I remember I was on a series of Fortunate Events with Barry Sonnenfeld and Bo Welch, and the very first prop was a spyglass, the key prop of the whole series. And I showed my very first meeting with them was a toilet paper roll and a paper towel roll taped together. And I said, I know I'm not inspiring confidence in this moment, but I'm looking for a size because I had a concept drawing, but I had a size. So they gave me the size based on the cardboard. Then I 3D printed it with all moving parts and everything so they could see how it was going to function before we made it out of metal.
How do you work on a period film, something like Passchendaele, for instance, or the assassination of Jesse James? I mean, how do you approach it? Do you do a lot of research? I mean, especially, I think both of those films, the directors wanted authenticity. So did you have to do a lot of research? And then how do you get props that have to be period correct?
Well, going to Passchendaele to start with, the director Paul Gross, Canadian World War I film, he was he had been trying to make that movie for a decade. So he gave us a large binder of his research, and he had justification for almost every scene. He would have a historical document attached to why that scene was in the movie. In my world, I spend a lot of time in museums. I spend a lot of time on the phone. I love going to the library. I still love books. I tend not to use the internet a ton for that type of research. I really like to get the books and go through the historical side. And then with Passchendaele or Legends of the Fall or Ararat, which is an Adam McGowan film where we had to get the type of web gear and stuff like what you had on 1917, London has wonderful rental houses. And so we shipped all of our web gear over from London, and all the German gear came over from London to use on those sets on all three films. And any of the stuff that the actors wore that had to have bullet hits and any of that, we got out of India, and then we had to dye it into the tone of the movie. So, but the research side from all the firearms and all of that, it's my favorite part of the job. I love research.
And if you're doing a period piece, a lot of times people have told us that they'll know the period, but they're not always completely strict with it because it looks better or it seems to fit what they're doing a little bit better. Or in the case of if you're shooting the 80s, if you have something from the 70s, it makes sense it could be in the 80s. But how do you feel about fudging the period?
I mean, at the end of the day, it's the director's choice, ultimately, and the production designer. I know we're not making a documentary, but our job, I had a production designer tell me years ago that we're kind of like the history teachers right now because of the way schools work and everything, that people will go to a film and they will look at what was done, and they'll think that is the way it is. And so I still try my best, but ultimately at the end of the day, I provide a service to the production designer and the director at the end of the day. And if the director says, I want it to be this type of shotgun that I know didn't exist the 2 years prior to when we're filming, but I still want it. And so at the end of the day, I will provide that service. So I've learned to kind of let it go. Andrew on Jesse James was rigid with history. He was obsessed, as we all know. And so, and I took great pride in that with him. And I had to actually justify some of my props and show him the historical research that Bakelite was a material around before plastic that, I had to sort of, I remember he stopped. He actually didn't want to film for a minute because he was questioning the heel on one of the children's shoes in the train car. So I just remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
But that's kind of good in a way because it sort of sets out these rules, and going into it, okay, I've got to be able to justify.
I love that. I love when everybody wants it to be right. I just take great pride in that.
Yeah. What was the hardest part about Jesse James for you?
I had a lot of firearm cross-border problems in the beginning because of the firearm laws in Canada, which are even stricter now, but back then it would take 6 weeks to import a firearm into the country. So Brad's firearms were being custom made in Los Angeles, and Casey's Patterson Colt was being custom made in Los Angeles. And we were right up against it just before filming. As a matter of fact, on the Thursday before the Monday, day one, and when Bob's taking a bath and Paul Snyder is threatening him with his pistol, I didn't have a Patterson Colt. The Pattersons were somewhere in shipping, didn't know where they were. I phoned everybody that I knew in Canada, and there wasn't a Patterson. Well, there's one Patterson in Calgary, and it was on another set, and the prop master wouldn't release it to me. And so I get up at 5 a.m. on Friday. This is Friday, and we shoot Monday. And I phone a guy in Ontario, Canada, who we bought 1,000 rifles from on Legends of the Fall, like 12 years earlier. And I think I woke him up. He wasn't very happy with me until I said Legends of the Fall. And then he remembered I was the guy that bought 1,000 rifles. And I said, listen, this is a long shot because I've tried everybody. You don't happen to have a Patterson Colt, do you? Like a reproduction Patterson Colt? And he said, yeah, I do. I went, you do? And I said, okay, well, here's the deal. I don't care what it costs. Can you take, and you live 2 hours from the airport. I said, can you drive it to the Ottawa airport and put it on a plane today on Air Canada and get it out to us? I'll have the office make all the arrangements. We'll get you paid by credit card, which the accountants didn't want to do, but I had to get David Valdez involved. And so on the Saturday morning, I drove to the airport, please let it be in, please let it be in. And the Air Canada guy asked me a thing, and I was so relieved. There's the Patterson for Monday's shoot. And he goes, do you want the other two? Another package came in for him. Suddenly I had the 2 Pattersons from LA showed up.
Oh, wow.
So I had those. And then what happened, and we were filming at the house, the Colonel's house exterior in that big valley. And cell phone didn't.
In the swamp.
In the swamp. So anyway, I get a call from Vancouver that Brad's firearms have arrived in Vancouver, and they were being put on an Air Canada flight overnight to be in Calgary for the next day. So because I think we were shooting nights or splits, I can't remember what it was, I went late in the afternoon to pick up the firearms at Air Canada. And the guy goes, oh, yeah, they got released earlier today. And some guy named Kevin signed for them. And I'm like, how can you just release firearms? I have a federal license. You can't just release firearms to anybody. Like, what is this? But we had a driver named Kevin on the show. So I thought, okay, well, Kevin's got them. And so I get to set and I see Kevin and I go, Kevin, did you pick up a box of I said, Kevin, you got that box for me at the airport? And he goes, I didn't pick up a box for you. He said, I picked up a box for the electrics of candles. He said, I got a box of candles. So I go over to Marty's truck and I go, hey, did you get a box by mistake that's addressed to me? And one of the best boys or one of the guys said, no, we got some candles we sent down to set. And so I'm like, uh-oh, suddenly I have 12 firearms missing in the universe. So I get on the phone to the production office and they phoned around the other shows that were filming to check with all their drivers named Kevin to see if they picked up the box. And I'm up top. They're downstairs or down below. Johnny, my first, is on set, and you guys are all getting set for the shot. And I'm up at the circus pacing and my brain's going 100 miles an hour. I'm thinking, man, I guess I have to phone the police. Like, I was getting to that point. So I phoned Brian Parker, our production manager, and I let him know what was going on. So, look, I don't know what happened, but these things are in the wind somewhere. And I said, I think the next step is going to be to phone the RCMP. And all of a sudden, Brian goes, oh, just a minute. I've got David on the other line. David Valdez, the producer. Mm-hmm. Brian goes back on the thing and goes, your guns are on set. And I'm like, what? And so what happened was Johnny's standing there, and Nancy McDonald, the script supervisor, says, where's Dean? And Johnny's telling her about my dilemma up top. And Johnny said, I looked over and there were a couple of electrics spinning firearms.
Oh, no.
The box of candles was the box of firearms. And what happened was, in LA, like in Canada, we don't ship anything without trigger locks and lock cases. But the boxes came from LA, or the firearms came from LA in a cardboard box in just zip pouches for safety and no trigger locks. And when my broker picked it up in Vancouver, he didn't open the box because it was all signed for through customs brokers. And so he just took the box as it was over to Air Canada and put it on the plane. And so I was like, I think I lost maybe 5 years off of my life. And that was like day 3 of filming. I thought, how am I going to make it?
That is a little scary. Tell me, when you have reproduction guns made, I mean, how authentic are they? Can they fire? Are these dangerous weapons?
Yeah, no, these are real firearms. These are the guys in LA. Brad had his firearms specifically tuned and custom for his hand and the trigger falls. As a matter of fact, it's not in the script anywhere, but the historical firearms that were found after Jesse was killed, spoiler alert, we had the authentic serial numbers engraved on the firearms for Brad.
Oh, my word.
You know, it's not in the script anywhere. We just did that. So getting back to your question, all these firearms are real firearms. They're capable of putting a 45 bullet in and firing. There's no, on a Western revolver, there's no special conversion to them like you can. Obviously, in our world, we never have live ammo, and it's very strictly regimented. What I did, though, on Jesse James for the shootout in the bedroom with Wood Height and Bob and Casey was I did build, at the time, post-production muzzle flash was around, but it was still kind of expensive. And on a show like Jesse James, we just didn't have a lot of money for post-production add-ons like that. So I had a company in Vancouver build a couple of electric revolvers. So when Paul and Jeremy are shooting at each other at close range, those were like cap guns that were wired to have a bit of flame and a bit of smoke, but you could literally hold it against your hand and pull the trigger. But for the most part, everything we used on Jesse James, that was historical or reproduction firearms.
Tell me that sort of like chaotic story. I'm just managing to get the guns in time. But I mean, are you ever caught out? Even on Jesse James, there was some, last minute changes because of weather and everything, and the kind of films you've been on, I mean, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, well, Jesse James had a moment, I don't know if you remember, but when we had, as you affectionately call the toy train, the arrival, which is, you've heard of, everybody says that about that open shot. So I'm not going to continue. It's magnificent. But originally in the script, the only gunshot was Brad. Brad was going to fire one shot in the air to alert the engineer, hey, we're here, we mean business. And then we set up to do the blocking of the guys running down the hill. And at the end of the blocking, Andrew looks at me and goes, I want everybody to fire. And there was just Johnny, myself, and I had a local hire out of Edmonton who was not a firearms guy on the set. And suddenly we had all these crackerneck guys. I think there were like 15 of them that were going to be firing handguns and shotguns. And I think it was about 2 a.m. It was getting really cold as well, like because of we just had so little time to shoot that whole sequence. So everything was happening fairly quick. And here's the lucky thing. It never happens in my professional life anywhere. I would never do it. But our greensman, Jimmy Weeks, who was responsible for that wonderful grass in the back of the snake scene and all of that, well, he's an ex-military guy. And he always said to me, if you ever have an issue, let me know. And his assistant, Jesse, there were 2 former Canadian soldiers. And they walked past me and they saw the look on my face. And I went, Jimmy, I'm giving you a 5-minute lesson on how to clear a firearm. And suddenly I drafted those 2 guys in to help us get through that scene that night. And so, and the thing you do there, as we all do, you just have to be calm and you have to process it. And then you have to, we would not have loaded everybody if we couldn't have done it safely. I would have said, look, I would have said, Andrew, I can do 5. I can't do 15. But because I was confident in Jesse and Jimmy, I thought, okay, and Johnny, we were covered for safety and we could do it well. And that happens occasionally. But with firearms, after Brandon Lee was killed and it did get a lot safer after that in 1993. There's all these safe steps we take. I won't go into the Rush tragedy here too much other than to say, if they would have done one of our 5 safety steps that I do, nothing would have happened. Plus, they had a live round on set. So every rule that we know was not in play there. But on a film like Jesse James, where we didn't have a lot of gunplay, but when we did, it doesn't matter if it's 1 shot or 100 shots. You treat everyone exactly the same, and every setup is its own safety meeting. You kind of look at it and go, okay, we can do this safely, or we can't.
When you're doing scenes with a ton of extras, and let's say it's a war scene or they're a fight scene, so they're wearing bullets, they're carrying guns, they're doing this, they're doing that. They've got all kinds of your props on them, and then they break for lunch. Do you make them all turn in the props and then hold up the lunch line? I mean, how do you manage that? Because there are sometimes so many extras.
Yeah, I'll go to Legend of the Fall and Passchendaele, my 2 ventures into World War I. And the rifles are always turned in. They don't take their web gear off or anything, but the rifles are always turned in. Any firearm is turned in. If they're wearing, on a Western, if they're wearing a gun belt, a cartridge belt and a holster, we just take their sidearms away. We don't strip them down because it just will take too much time. And you're right, James, the lunch line is but inevitably, there's always a couple of soldiers that fall asleep in the battlefield somewhere. So you do your count and everybody goes for lunch and you're going, well, we're short 2 rifles, which means that myself and somebody else are wandering around this vast battlefield looking for some hole that 2 people disappeared to sleep in. And sure enough, they're there sleeping and you give them hacking. And then I go back and get the AD set because I go, don't you count people that come back? But yeah, we always take the firearms away or any weaponry. But with the actors, obviously, we'll take their gun belts away and stuff. We want the actors to be comfortable. The background, not that we don't want them to be comfortable, but we're not stripping. We're not stripping them down.
You got to deal with reality.
Yeah,
It's interesting how it's changed. I'm glad to hear things are so much safer now. A lot of shots are done CG, aren't they? You think back in the day when Sergei Eisenstein was shooting, I think he shot the storming of the Winter Palace, and actually more people were killed in the reenactment than the actual occasion, because a lot of the people that were involved brought their guns and they were still loaded. And I think that's true. I read it somewhere.
Yeah, years ago, I did a Western called The Virginian, a little Turner Western, and Dennis Weaver was the star, and Dennis Weaver from Gunsmoke and McLeod and all these shows that I grew up watching. And so when Dennis came to set, I did go through all my steps of how to present a firearm safely. And the last thing I do is I cycle the cylinders so they can see that all the primers are struck. And then I always click it off 7 times, even a 6-shot revolver, I click it off for them. And I told Dennis, I said, look, if you go back to your trailer, just find me. I'm on the set and I'll take it from you. Because once I put it in and they're on this Western set, I don't mind them walking around within the world I'm in as well. So anyway, Dennis comes over like half hour later and he hands me the revolver, says, I'm just running to the washroom. And when he came back, I started to go through the process again. And he looked at me and he goes, why are you doing that again? You showed me. I said, it was out of your sight. And because it was out of your sight, you have to know it's safe. And he goes, no, don't get me wrong. I appreciate you doing it. And he told me a story about being back on the Westerns when he was one of the B lot players. Like they go to the holding pen and it's like, okay, we need 5 cowboys in the saloon down at Maverick, or we need them on whatever show. So he was sitting at a card table with a bunch of guys and they're all bored. And he pulled his revolver and he was twirling it and he pointed at the floor and cocked the hammer and pulled the trigger, and it had a live round in it. He shot he shot it into the floor of the set. So I will always, I don't care if you hand me that revolver and you walk around the corner to say something to the director and then you come back. It's even for me. It's just muscle memory. Like I just do it. It's just like click, and give it back to him. Because at the end of the day, everybody has to go home safe. This is just for me, I'm a Canadian, so my love of firearms is not a love affair of firearms. I grew up around hunting guns, but for me, it's a chainsaw I make safe in an actor's hands. In my personal life, I have zero interest, but professionally, I have to be very good.
And then I have noticed sometimes on sets where the actors, they have to handle something and then they go off and they'll hand it to anyone. I mean, they literally, they'll hand it to whoever's standing there, whether it's appropriate or not. So do you run into the problem of losing those, especially the smaller items are really easy, and then that person who's not a prop person might put it down on a table, and then you're suddenly ready to go, and where the hell is it?
Oh, the rings and watches I've hunted for at the end of every day to find it hanging in a wardrobe rack costume or in a pocket, or most times the actors are very good and we're very on top of them when they call wrap. But sometimes you get the surprise wrap that the actor's been back at the trailer and all of a sudden something happens. Okay, we're going to wrap. And you're like, I got to go find, he's got the ring, he's got the watch, the eyeglasses, or she. And so very rarely does it happen. And most people on set, if they're handed something, they immediately, I know if I'm handing something to somebody else's, I'm looking for that department in a hurry to give it back so that there's not that panic. But mostly for me, it's about, okay, I got to go to the trailer. I hope it's in there. We better have a double.
Yeah.
How different are these movies you worked on? I know you worked on with Clint Eastwood on Unforgiven. I know you were assistant then, but I kind of imagine working with him compared with you worked with Kevin Costner on Open Range, and you worked with David Lowery too. I mean, very different directors, Ed Zwick. I mean, how different is it for you? I mean, how do you sort of gauge what your job's going to be?
Well, I think for James and yourself and all of us, we have to figure out how to marry into that personality we're dealing with, whether it's Ed, who can be somewhat volatile, but very talented, or David Lowery, who's just a gem, Kevin. So in prep, I'm a very quiet person, so I don't really change my personality to suit each director. I feel like I just come in, I really am invested in the script. I really, I think I have a love for craft. That's why I'm still here 40 years later. So when I sit down with let's say Ed Zwick, Ed, I had met on Leaving Normal just as a day call for my friend Jimmy Chow, and Ed had done Glory, and I'd done a Japanese samurai battle scenes with 3,000 samurai. So he and we kind of clicked on Glory, my love of Glory, and he had seen this little Japanese film that only played in Japan called Tendichi. So I already had a shorthand with Ed. So when Legend started, as hard as Ed could be on people, for some reason he was always very kind to me and would always let me come in. And even though I was the assistant prop master, Jimmy was away in Jamaica or somewhere else on location, he'd send me something to show Ed if Ed wasn't with them wherever they were on location. So that was good. And then with Clint's very quiet. And Clint travels with a company at that time, he was traveling with his Malpaso group. So his costume designer had been with him for 35 years. Eddie Iona, the prop master I worked with, had been with him for 20 years. The stunt coordinator, Buddy Van Horns, had been with him for years and years. So what you're trying to do is figure out, how am I going to fit into this fully functioning film crew and not be the outlier? And my funny story about Clint is we all have day one of shows. It doesn't matter how many years you do this. I don't sleep very well before day one of any movie still, even though I may have been prepared and the director and I get along great in prep, but until you actually walk on the set and everybody is suddenly there, we're out of the office, we're out of the boardroom, we're out of the meetings, and we're all standing there, and now all our parts have to fit. And so with Clint, I was staying in a hotel in Brooks, Alberta. We were filming his homestead where he shoots the can off the stump. It was day one. And the hotel I stayed in, I ironically got beat up in the parking lot 12 years earlier as a member of a rig crew. So my memory of that hotel was not great. But I will say this, I didn't sleep much because I was so excited about how my life had gone from oil field work to suddenly I'm going to work on an Eastwood film. And they had a big motor coach bus to take us to location, because Clint doesn't like motorized vehicles. So the odd department head could take their truck to the circus, but the crew were not coming en masse with their personal vehicle. We were getting on buses and going out to the wilderness. And I just remember sitting on that bus. A lot of people were sleeping and I was wide awake. I was wired. I'm looking, I could see some rig crew lights. And I thought, man, 10 years ago, I was one of those guys on that rig crew. And now I'm driving past a rig where I might even be in the same field I was in. And so I get to set, and Eddie's Iona, the prop master, looks at me and goes, "Hey, there's a scene where Clint's going to put some flowers on Claudia's grave later, and I saw some really nice flowers in the ditch about a mile back." and get Charlie the Teamster to take you back there. So Charlie is big Teamster and we're in the ditch picking flowers. And I look up and there's this pickup truck slowing down and looking at us. And the guy in the passenger seat was Clint Eastwood with a big smile. And I couldn't think of anything to do. I was standing there holding my bouquet and I just gave him a feeble wave, which in all my dreams of working with Clint Eastwood, I thought, I'm this. So we go fast forward like an hour and a half into prep, and Clint had to use a pistol called a Star 44, and it never, I asked Eddie about it. He said it never fires 6 rounds in prep. He said he hated it. He's trying to talk Clint into using something else. So when Clint walks into the cabin, he looks and he finally realizes that I'm with Eddie. And he goes,
oh, right.
Yeah. So he said, I've seen a lot of things on day one of movies, but he said, I don't think I've ever seen a prop man and a Teamster picking flowers in a ditch together, which cracked up the room. So that was my welcome to Unforgiven.
Yeah. But did he use the flowers?
Were they
flowers
did.
That he used?
Eddie had bought some flowers and he used the flowers. And the thing about that scene was, even when Clint was standing there, and I'm just quiet as can be, because I don't think I ever said 5 words to Clint the entire movie, because I think he thought I was just the illiterate prop guy, because I was just always in awe around him. And so with the Star, what happened was we had to load it it's a black powder pistol. So Eddie, without Mike Sexton, his assistant, who became Clint's longtime prop master after, without us talking to each other, the cylinder comes out, Eddie dumps in the powder, he hands it to Mike, who packs in the wad, and then he hands it to me, and I put on the firing cap on the end and hand it back, and Eddie takes it. Clint goes out, it fires 6 shots. It doesn't misfire. So we're loading the second one, same way, passing around, don't say anything, hand it to Clint. It fires all 6 shots, which had never happened in prep. So fast forward to the end of the film, and Eddie said, what do you think we came together as a department? And I said, that's easy. That was like the first scene, the Star Pistol day. And he said, yeah, I thought the same thing. And he pulled out a picture of Clint, because I'm not one for asking for autographs, of Clint firing the pistol with a note to me with the Star. And I thought, how receptive of him for that.
All right. But how do you judge? I mean, Clint Eastwood's kind of renowned for doing 1 or 2 takes, I mean, as a sort of norm. But then other directors, I mean, Ed Zwick can do quite a few, and so how do you allow for that with a prop,
Well, you sit down in prep and you kind of say, look, how many do you want? And then I always will add. And so, and the other thing is, when you get to the set, you have to let everybody know ahead of time, even a day ahead of time. Look, I've got 12 things prepared for this. If it's a breakaway, if it's an action prop that can't be reset, and same with multiple takes. Now, I will say this: Andrew tricked me on Jesse James once, where I was in the train car when we were robbing the mail car, and Brad picks up a package, and he's supposed to open it and pull out a photo, and then toss it. And Andrew came up to me 2 or 3 hours before the scene, and he said, yeah, I think I'd like him to smash a cigar box instead. And I'm like, it's night, we're on the train. I'm not sending anybody to an antique store, but luckily we'd already shot the general store, and I knew Jan had some cigar boxes set up in there. So I ran over there quickly, and I think she had like 5, which is nothing on a film, right? So I get in there and I have 5 cigar boxes. I had to stain them. Our painter stains them down. And so I told Brad, Brad, I only have 5 of these. So, but
easy.
Actors, when they get in a moment, right? I've had actors, a lot of actors told me, look, when I'm in it, I don't know what I'm doing. Like when I say, be careful, this could, and they say, when I'm in it, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm so in it. And Brad smashed one of them in the rehearsal. And I'm like, now I have 4. So I had this prop guy sitting in the passenger car with glue. And every time Brad smashed a cigar box, Johnny and I would pick up the pieces and take them into the passenger car and put them in front of this poor guy and go, well, Wayne, good luck. And go back. And we got through the night. And so to go back to your long question, like with Kevin or David Lowry, I get a sense in prep, And I do phone people that have worked with these directors before if I haven't worked with them,
Right.
just to get a sense, like, what is this person like? Are they prone to multiple? Is this Michael Mann? Like, well, what are we doing? Or David Fincher? Like, is this? And because the interesting thing when you do TV versus feature film is, although TV's gotten bigger with streaming, is that feature film, you have to plan on a minimum of pretty much 12 to 24 of anything that is, because of the time you have to get the proper coverage. You're not racing a 12-hour deadline on, trying to shoot 5-6 pages. So in TV, I find I can get away with 6 a lot of times. David Lowery was a gem. You guys have talked to him. I've listened to the cast. He was just such a joy. I loved every minute of working with him. And I loved every minute of working with Kevin Costner as well. Kevin is I don't think he puts himself into situations where I don't think he gets the credit he truly deserves, because he's actually a very good director. And he's very well prepared and well thought out. And he really planned Open Range really well. Like it was a good set to work on. And I think that, you and I, all of us have a mutual dear friend, one of the best producers in the world, David Valdez. And I met David on Unforgiven, and which brought me to Open Range, which brought me to Jesse James. And, you get lucky if you get to work with somebody like that. In my career, living in a small film center, if I get to work with that person once, I consider that great luck. To work with them twice is incredible luck. And when David phoned me about Jesse James, I was like, I just think I won the lottery of being able to work with people. So,
yeah, he's definitely a wonderful producer.
You say in your book that at one point you were asked to do science fiction and you didn't like science fiction.
So you did Falling Skies, right? You worked on Falling Skies.
And STARGATE. And I did some of the STARGATEs as well.
Right.
Yeah.
I would have thought would have thought it'd been easier to work on science fiction because nobody has any preconceived
you
kind
have
of
a little bit
ideas
of latitude.
You're not, you know what? You're not wrong. And the key to science fiction is having good builders who can create these fantasy props for you. And my first adventure into sci-fi in Calgary was a disaster. I got to meet the wonderful Ray Bradbury, though, and he came and sat at my desk and corrected my punctuation. He's such a lovely man. He sat with Jan and I, actually, and we had a nice conversation. But he had this little TV show called, I don't know, Ray Bradbury, I guess. But and I had to do Mars, and I had a budget of about $38. And so trying to do Mars, and I just remember I had somebody build me this prop, and it was not good. It was not a good sci-fi prop. It was like a little black box. I don't know. And I had to walk up to David Carradine, and I went, "Here you go, David. There's no close-up." And he looked at it. It's a good thing. And so, you kind of go. So I'm finished. I'd done. I forget. It was shortly after Open Range. I got a call. I did Walking Tall with The Rock, and I was in Vancouver. And the producer phoned me and said, "Hey, I hear you want to come and do STARGATE." And I went, there's 4 Dean prop masters in Vancouver. I think you've got the wrong one, because I do cowboy movies. And the producer I'd worked with before he knew me, he said, no, just think of it as cowboys in space. And I would sit in the meetings, and these guys have been on the show for 7 years, and they would say all this terminology, and I'd be sitting there completely lost. Like, I have no idea. I don't know what you're saying. And this crazy fan, because all these sci-fi shows have such a following of fans. I had not experienced fandom until I entered into that world. And I just remember leaving my office one day, and I had to walk out the door to go to the main office. I had to walk across the lot. I opened the door, and all of a sudden applause breaks out, and there's like 100 people standing at the fence dressed in costumes of our show. And I'd never seen it. I'd come from, Jesse James. I was like,
right.
What is going on? So I go back in and ask my assistant, and she says, "Oh no, these are the fans of the show. They come every year. You should go say hello to them." I'm like, "I'm not that. No." So
that's not in my job.
Yeah. So this woman, one of the fans, thankfully, had written a dictionary of every term used on the show up to that point. And so they gave me that book. So that way, if I was in a meeting or read the script, I could read what the meaning of the word was or what the prop was. And so when they came in to see me, one of the key weapons was, I think it was called a Zat gun. And in all honesty, it looked like a dildo shaped like a Z. And all I kept thinking was, who got to give this prop to Richard Dean Anderson looking like this? And anyway, the two fan club members and this lady who wrote the book came into the prop office because everybody wants to see I call them the toys. And this guy goes, can we see his Zat gun? And I'm like, sure. I go get it. It's got servo motors and lights, and it does this thing. And I hand it to him. He goes, oh, the power I have in my hands. I'm thinking I'm thinking it's 2 9-volts and 2 servo motors, but okay, it's a lot of power. And I just could never get comfortable in that world at first. And then Falling Skies was a favor to a friend because everybody knew about Falling Skies in Vancouver. It was a really hard show. It was a lot of nights. It was a lot of gunfire. We probably would go through some days 50,000 rounds in a day of just automatic gunfire. It was just a big, noisy, messy, rain, alien show. And towards the end of the second season or the final season, I looked at the producer that I had been working with, a good friend, and I said, I just got to move on. I got to go do something else. And at the time, the one director who could still phone me and get me back to work as a prop master, Cameron Crowe, was doing a pilot in Vancouver for a show called Roadies. And I would have to walk past their production office hallway with all their photos of concert setups, like my world that I grew up with, and Cameron Crowe, who I read in Rolling Stone, to go to the boardroom to listen to how we're going to shoot this latex wearing alien with the heaviest machine gun we can find. And so our producer, who was a wonderful woman, always tried to take care of her show. So she's always trying to get one final thing we could do before we all split off. And she said, I've got a pilot. And I'm like, I don't want to do a pilot. She said, well, no, it just gives you a little bit of money before you go home. And so I'm doing this pilot, and I can't remember the name of the title, but it's like good-looking teenagers eating homeless people. I don't need to go too far into the script on that one, except it's 4 a.m. And I get called by the first AD. And I'm like, you're thinking, oh God, what fresh hell awaits? And I go walking over to the first AD. He's got his phone out. He's got the gaffer and he's got the key grip standing there. And they're scrolling. And he looks at me and he goes, so we were just talking. And I go, yeah. And he goes, so you worked on Unforgiven, right? And I go, yeah. Open Range, Jesse James. Like he's going through my movie IMDb. And I go, yeah. And he goes, we were just wondering, how'd you end up here? And it was funny in the moment, but I have to admit, when I got in the truck, we wrapped at sunrise. I'm driving back to the apartment that I'm in right now. And I thought, man, I think I've, because Jesse James was such a high point. And then even though it wasn't critically acclaimed, the Canadian war film Passchendaele was such a joyous experience of telling Canadian soldiers' stories that I thought, oh, I think I might be in a rut. And this is where our mutual friend Patrice Vermette comes in, because I wouldn't do. I'm not a Marvel or DC Comics guy. I've gone and helped a friend of mine as a prop master on the second unit stuff, but whenever they called me, I was like, no. And to the point where I got called to do a film with a $120 million budget, and I chose a $2 million film because I liked the script, and that's just kind of how I rolled. So I was like, I was not on the radar for any movies. I was a TV guy. I became TV guy. And nothing against TV, but at that time, streaming hadn't taken off, so it was still network or syndicated. And I saw Denis Villeneuve's name on a BC list of possibly doing Arrival in Vancouver. And I thought, I got to somehow get to his designer. So I sent Patrice an email through the Directors Guild of Canada, just one of those I just wanted to introduce myself if you're looking for a prop master. And he got back to me. And he set up a Skype with me. And he said, we're going to have a Skype, in a week. And he said, I'm very interested because your resume is not like everybody else's. You don't have any superhero movies or anything. You're kind of like all over the map with Japanese films and European stuff. And he said, I kind of like that. And so the day of the Skype, he calls me and he says, yeah, the Skype's canceled. And my heart sank. I was like, oh. And he goes, no. He said, I phoned Roger Deakins to congratulate him on his Oscar nomination. And I brought your name up, and he said, I don't know if this is a true story, but he said, you told him to hire me. And I was like, shocked. And so for a month, I was going to be Denny Villeneuve and Patrice's prop master, but then the film couldn't find any stages because Vancouver was a TV town. It was all the stages were full. So they were taking the show back to Quebec. And as Patrice said, if I brought you to Quebec, my crew would kill me. And I said, well, I understand that. He said, if I ever come to Vancouver, I'll hire you. And literally 18 months later, the phone rang and it's Patrice going, I told you I'd call you if I came here. And it was Kate Winslet's Film and Mountain between us. And so I got to work with Patrice there. And the producer said, I've never hired the prop master first on anything before anybody. And I went, well, that was Patrice. That was so kind of him.
Well, that was great. I hope that was a good experience.
What
was it like working in snow like that? I mean, that must have been a difficult one just to, work with the actors and not ruin the set kind of thing.
Yeah, well, as you know, from being around the Jesse James set when it did snow and we wanted snow, but up on the glacier is a whole different. I worked 3 different glacier units, so you're up at 10 and 11,000 feet, and you don't just get on a helicopter and go up there. Luckily, I had about a 6-week break between shows, so I hired a trainer. I said, I got to go to the gym. I've got to work on my physical fitness and stuff. And Mandy Walker was the DOP and had a wonderful crew. And so we're up on this glacier at 11,000 feet, and the grips figured out how to move a techno crane on skids and all of that. And we had a lot of real estate that we could get fresh snow. But, I just remember it was Kate and I, we had to hike up this ridge. And I just remember I spent 6 weeks in the gym. And when we got to the top of that ridge, both of us looked at each other and I thought my lungs were going to fall out of my chest. And it takes a day to acclimatize when you're at elevation. And I was on Incredible Hulk. I followed Ed Norton around on a glacier for a week on behalf of the prop master on that show. And then I also did a glacier unit on Silver Surfer for a prop master named Jimmy Chow. So you just have to be very mindful of the set, what the director's vision is, what areas to not go into. And so we were very good. That was a great crew. That crew on the mountain were spectacular.
When you're working on a movie and you do you check if there's second unit, because second unit means more props oftentimes, right? How do you figure that in? Because also sometimes second unit means, oh, we'll get a second unit group. Oh gosh, we're getting a little behind, so we'll throw this to them too, which could also mean that something that you hadn't expected will be done by second unit and needs additional props. How do you deal with that?
You hire a second unit prop master or a first assistant prop master, and you basically it all comes down to meetings and preparation. You really have to. Second unit, sometimes you feel like, I've done a number of second units on big films, you feel like the orphans in the wind because you're searching for information and you're trying to figure out what to shoot, and 3/4 of what you shoot never makes it into the film or even more. And some directors don't want second unit, they kind of rebel, and the producers want second unit because they think they can save money, but in the end it saves no money. It's kind of I've been lucky. I haven't really had many second units. It's as a prop master, working on Jesse James or Open Range or even Unforgiven. I found that the type of films I do didn't really have a second unit. Passchendaele did. We had about a week where we wanted to do inserts on cannons, and we wanted to do soldiers marching and some of the hand-to-hand stuff that we could get close-ups on hand-to-hand combat. And I just hired a crew. What I usually do is break away one of my main crew. And bring in somebody to help me on the main unit. And I send somebody who's been with the show the whole time. We'll go over and do the second unit. I don't think it's any good to bring somebody in cold and drop them into the middle of a fully functioning group and have them try to get up to speed. So my world is to move somebody off my main unit and bring somebody in to replace that person. Because if I'm running the set, I know everything that's going on. And if my assistant goes over there, they know everything that we've already established. So that's really the way I would do that.
And who hires the property master? Is it the production designer? Is it them that makes the decision?
It's an interesting thing. I find that in television, it's usually always a production designer because they don't really know who their directors are. So it's usually, showrunner. And But I have been interviewed by directors. I love being hired by directors. Because you sit down with the director and you have that talk about filmmaking, and you talk about the passion of filmmaking and what drives them, what drives me. And I find that there's a real connection. Sometimes production designers want to be involved in everything you do in props, and sometimes once you're connected to the director and the set, they really are off trying to make sure that the sets are built and all of that. So I'm going to say, for a young prop master listening, you're still 80%, you're going to go through the production designer, 80 to 90% still. But I love it when the director hires me.
What's the deal working in Canada? I mean, you were talking earlier about one time of not being able to work East Coast Canada compared with West Coast. Is it very split like that?
It's not so much anymore. I think that where it's tough is, as a department head, you can go anywhere. If the production wants you, you can go anywhere. Nobody will stop you. You can work anywhere. I think where it gets tough is if you want to bring in your assistants or you want to bring in supplemental crew, that's where you'll start to run into a roadblock. Obviously, housing people and per diem is expensive. And there are good crews across the country. But I won't travel. Like, I've been offered shows in Toronto all the time, but I feel like I'm an extension of a group of people. This group of people that I've been working with for years and years, they help make me who I am. So for me to go in cold and take a whole new group of people, I think it would be fine. In the end, you always figure out how to do it. But it's like you traveling with Andy and Bruce all those years. You have a shorthand. The job can be hard enough there, but you have a shorthand with them. So I can't go to the States.
And how do you?
I can't
Yeah,
go.
no.
I can on a special permit. I've been down there a couple times, but it's not anything that really happens in my world.
Might be more work in Canada at the moment. I don't know. How is the business in Canada at the moment? I mean, how's it changed since you were starting?
I'm always heartsick about what's going on right now because I have so many friends in Los Angeles and around the world. Canada, we're doing okay. We I would say we probably have about 60% employment in our local here in Vancouver. Calgary's a little slower. They have projects, but they're small projects. It feels like the feature film market is really, I think it might be struggling around the world because they don't really know what they want to do right now. And this whole streaming model and all of that has kind of messed it all up. So, but business-wise in Canada, I think we're okay. I have a lot of friends in Los Angeles. I just was trying to reach out to somebody who builds wonderful badges for me, and he's closed his shop in LA. And that type of news it's just sad, really.
Okay. Well, thank you for doing this.
Dean,
This has been great.
Wow. Well, it was quite an honor. And I want to ask you one question, Roger. What possessed you to sit in a sailboat for 9 months going around the world? Because
That's a good question.
I was getting tense by the end of that journey. And I watched the documentary, so.
It's like a lot of things in life. When you see the opportunity in front of you, you kind of think, oh, how would I feel if I turned that down? How would I feel about that when I'm 50 or 60 if I turn that opportunity down? So yeah, there were times I think, what the hell am I doing here? But yeah, I've got no regrets. Yeah, what a memory.
That was an amazing story. And the documentary I was getting claustrophobic and I could almost feel
I don't know. I think the documentaries aren't very good, but I think the experiences live in my mind, and that's more important to me.
Yeah. Well, this has been, I can't even begin to tell you what a pleasure and a joy. And I have no words, really.
Thank you, Dean.
Okay.
No, thank you.
Well,
it's really been nice to see you again and talk to you. Yeah, it's great to see you doing so well too.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Very
much.
good.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take
Bye.
care. Cheers.
If you'd like to sponsor the Team Deakins podcast, let us know at pod@teamdeakins.com. Thanks for listening. If you want more information and further discussion, check out the forums at www.rogerdeakins.com. Becoming a member is free, and you can ask follow-up questions there. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more new questions and topics. Also, check us out on Instagram at team.deakins. See you next time.